Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth webinar in our series, Let Down in Lockdown. I'm Supriya Nair from NWMI. A quick recap, this whole initiative started about 5 months ago when two of our members, Raksha and Durga, opened up their DMs on social media as a sort of helpline to help those who had lost their jobs during the pandemic. Subsequently, we hosted a number of webinars on topics such as how to cope in such a situation, and also what are the legal options available for those affected, their rights, etc. We also discussed, what kind of, the troubles that the smaller media enterprises are going through during these tough times. And in another webinar, we spoke about the options available for freelancers. Today's workshop actually is a sort of, a continuation of that, and we'll be focusing on pitching. If all the details to the previous webinars will be available in our chat. And that's all. Thank you, and over to Supriya.
Thank you, Supriya. But I think Rohini is going to interject at this point.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Hello, everyone. It's good to have you here. We are hoping to have a sort of, we've done webinars till now, but now what we're doing is hoping to have kind of more workshop-y thing. Unfortunately, you'll not be able to interact with us much at this point in the beginning. So we'll each of us be doing a little bit of a presentation or a talk on different aspects of pitches from editor's point of view. I'll be talking about it from the reporter's point of view, and Mehthab will be talking about again from the editor's point of view, and also the writer's point of view for a lot of non-English media. So because there are unique, different sectors have different ways of thinking about it. Of course, it's also, as we learn in this, it's also sometimes very editor specific, but these are things we can talk about. So let me just first introduce Supriya Nair, who will be beginning first. So Supriya is a columnist with the Mumbai Mirror. She used to be with the Caravan. She also is a freelance writer. So she's kind of balanced both editing and writing roles, and going from the news, politics, and culture, books. So it's someone whose word you can take as, if not gospel, it's good. It's good to listen to her for, I've also worked with her on some of my own stories. So I know that a lot of her understanding of how the media functions and how we write is pretty solid. So Supriya will talk first, and then I'll also introduce Mehthab, but he'll come in later. Mehthab is the editor with the Wire Urdu. He's also writing a book on young Muslims in India. So again, a person who does multiple things, and as it's clear, all of us freelancers do a bunch of things. I am a journalist, independent journalist, and I also write for foreign and Indian publications, and I'm based in Bangalore. So Supriya, maybe you can start first with how we should all learn to write pitches.
Thank you, Rohini. Thank you everyone for being here, and happy Onam, because it's the start of the season. I hope we can all have a healthy rest of the year. I want to start with a really brief and broad overview to pitching. For those of you who are experienced freelancers, and please bear with me, I've tried to start from as close to the fundamentals as possible for people who may just be embarking on their journey as writers. I'll also try and keep this as short as possible, because I think it might be easier to address specific concerns through dialogue. So once I'm done, and if I've left something out, please chat to us, and I'll try and address that. I'll also send around a summary of what I'm saying in a document. I think NWMI may already have a link to that. Don't worry too much about taking notes through this, because kind of the broad aspects of it will be covered in a in a Google Sheet that we'll share after this. I'll also be available on email for a couple of weeks after this, so we can perhaps talk about specific questions or stories that you may be interested in writing up to a point. The first thing I want to start with is the subject that you're interested in writing about, which seems like the most important thing for you to tell an editor about. You write to her saying, hello, I'm a science writer, or I'm a sports writer. 99% of the time, this is never actually going to get you a response, because I don't know what I'm supposed to do when someone whose work I'm not familiar with tells me, hello, I'm interested in writing about science, besides saying, that sounds really interesting. If you met me face to face, say at a seminar, and you said, hi, I'm a sports blogger, that's one step further, right? You've not only told me about the subject you're interested in, but you've also told me something about the medium you work in. Then that gives me more space to ask a specific follow-up question, which is, great, where do I read your blog? And then you'll tell me, and then maybe I'll go look it up. Building relationships with editors becomes important, because we can then get to a stage where if I'm running a publication, and if Rohini writes into me saying, hello, I'm in Assam, I'm working on something, it's easy for me to say I'm interested in reading what you're working on, because I'm familiar with her work. We've worked together before, as she said. But a pitch is not about building a relationship, or rather it's only secondarily about that. The first thing it has to do is to sell your story, right? So your email is not about the subject of your expertise. It is about the specific thing that you are trying to sell to the publication. Hello, I'm a sports blogger. Fantastic. Hello, I have a story to write about Mahendra Singh Dhoni's retirement. Would you be interested in the details? Much better. I want to put a pin in that. Remind me if I forget about it, because there's something about pitching. Dhoni's retirement, which happened just this week, is very current. And I think there's something about pitching current newsy stories that needs a little bit more attention. But I won't go into that right now. So have a story in mind before you write your first email to an editor that you are not familiar with. Saying, hello, I'm a science writer is fine. Saying, hello, I'm a science writer. I would like to write a 1,500-word story about ISRO's 10-year plan for space exploration. Immediately, I know whether that's something that works for me or not. I did say just now that a pitch is not about building a relationship with the editor, but in some sense it is, which is why the most successful pitches are always the ones that are personalized. And that becomes important because editors read a lot of pitches, so they know when you are sending a kind of template email. If you send me, Mehthab, Rohini, and Durga all the same email about ISRO space exploration, we'd kind of know, right? When someone is sending you like a BCC email or whatever. The effectiveness of that kind of thing goes way low, because it may be that I'm really interested in your story and that I'll fight for it. But very often we don't have that kind of supply problem in publications, right? There are many more writers pitching stories than there is space for editors to accommodate them. So in order to be able to stand out, it's important to know who you are writing to. And let me give you a scenario here, which you may think is not relevant, but which we face an awful lot of the time. Say you're a technology writer, okay? And I'm a science editor. And you've written to me saying, hi, I'm writing a story about the new MacBook specs. Let me know if you'll carry it. It's not really of use to me, because science and tech are like separate beats, right? So there's nothing I can do about it. I don't want to waste time responding to this, because this has nothing to do with me. You haven't asked me any follow-up questions that I can usefully respond to, and you haven't really given me a sense that you know what my work is about, which means that it's likely that you don't know what my publication is about. So the chances of your story being actually useful to the publication that I work for have just gone down in my estimation. That's about knowing your editor. You should also know your audience, which is going to be the audience of the publication. And it kind of, these two things go together, right? So your story is your story, but once it's published, even though your name goes on it, it actually belongs to your readers, right? So who are you serving? Is a story that you want to write for a local newspaper going to be the same as the story that you write for a big digital publication based in Delhi? Probably not. And it's important for you to know, I mean, maybe this sounds philosophical, but just bear with me. It's really important for you to know who you want to write for. And we often let that stop when we think about the publications that we want to write for. But going a step further and knowing who the reader you want to write for is going to help you write better stories, which means that it's likely that you will also be writing better pitches. Okay, how do you get to know editors, right? This is pretty easy in this day and age because most editors, at least for English language media in India, have some kind of social media presence, or there's some kind of like digital presence where you at least know what email to reach out to. I'm not going to go over how to find someone's email on a website for obvious reasons. Reaching out on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram or wherever you are, perfectly fine. Polite query saying, hello, I have a tech story that I want to pitch to your magazine. Who can I write to? Thank you. Really good, 99% of the time, really effective. Slightly less effective. Hello, I know you're the science editor of Science Today publication. I have a new story about like the new MacBook specs. Who can I send it to? Like what? That's unnecessary, right? You've made like a little bit more of a demand on someone's time, and you've also given away the subject of your story. Do not do that on social media. Social media leeches away the energy of the story that you are writing. It mustn't. So to divert a little from the from the main subject of our talk, do not talk about your story on social media until it is done. Very often, it may be the case that you, although less often these days, may be the case that you only have a generic email ID to write to, right? So instead of writing to supriya@magazine.in, the website will only have a send mail at magazine.in. These do get read. It may be a bit of a hit on your confidence if you're writing into a void where there's no face to the recipient. Do not be deterred. Even if responses tend to be a bit slower, every magazine that I'm aware of in India will actually read through the emails in their general email ID. But over there again, the most useful thing to do is, instead of over and above a detailed pitch, if you don't want to keep sharing it, the best thing to do is to write in there and say, hello, I'm a tech writer. I have a story about X subject. Please let me know who at the magazine I can pitch this to. And then that makes it simple for them, right? Because it makes it simple for them to say, oh, Supriya is a technology editor. You can write to her at XYZ email. And that's one important step that you've figured out. The business communication way of looking at this is that pitches are supposed to be action-oriented emails. They are supposed to, A, get the attention of editors, but they're also supposed to do something that will make the editors respond to you, right? So you can write sort of the most action-oriented email possible, which gives the editor the easiest possible response that they can make. And that's, that just involves a couple of extra steps. So that's my introduction to how to get a conversation started. I have an important don't to underline to you, which may work for some people, but it hasn't worked for many of the editors that I know in my experience. Your pitch email, your first email, is always about the story. It is never the full story. And you can see a number of reasons why that's the case, right? You may have very good reasons for having a finished story ready, but an editor who doesn't know you doesn't always have the time to read through a full story. Editors often want to be involved in the kind of story that they are publishing. So even if your story is perfect for the publication that you're pitching it to, there's an immediate psychological wall that goes up that says, hey, it feels like this was done without my knowledge, which can make an editor reluctant to respond sometimes. And it's just a lot of work for you. So if you don't absolutely have to write the story before you email it to someone, please talk to them so that the conversation that you can then have will be about developing the story in a way that works best for you and the publication, rather than telling someone, hey, please read this brilliant piece of work that I've done. I know that for freelancers with some experience, we often go through, kind of the dispiriting experience of having written a story for one publication and then finding that for whatever reason, it no longer suits their needs. There's no need to give up hope for that kind of thing. A pitch for that story, which you are sending to a second publication, perfectly legitimate, right? The one thing that I would advise you to do in that conversation is to say, hi, I initially wrote this story hoping to publish it in Science magazine, but for various reasons, we weren't able to make that happen. I'm wondering if this will interest you, and then send like a description of the story again, and then ask the editor at Science 2 magazine if she's interested in reading it. The second thing that I would like to say it would be good for you not to send is your resume. Again, this, it's, you're starting a new conversation with a writer, with an editor. You want them to know you. You know that this is about selling your story, but also for the future, building a relationship. It can be quite tempting to send them sort of a comprehensive CV of all your work, but that's a job conversation, right? And that's not, it may seem like it's similar to selling a story conversation, but it's not. And very often that kind of thing, like the CV conversation, then just becomes a distraction. Just like go for the bullseye. And once you've hit that, everything else, I think, will follow a little bit more successfully. So please also don't send your resume. This is going to be difficult, especially if you have relatively little experience in pitching, but do not be afraid of sounding as confident as possible. The thing every editor dreams of is having a pitch in their inbox from a writer whom they're never going to have to second guess. So for you to send a pitch saying, hello, it's my first time pitching to a publication, I don't have much experience writing, perfectly fine. For you to elaborate on that saying, I have no, I'll tell you some of like sort of the common, the common ways to introduce themselves that I see from writers who are beginners. I don't have much training. This isn't my field. I'm not really sure if I've done the right thing. All of this seems, I mean, again, you may be perfectly sincere about this, right? And an editor should take you in good faith. But the psychological expense of that those kind of things have on your pitch is not inconsiderable. So I would say eliminate as much doubt as possible from those first emails as you can. The point of developing a story with an editor is that they are able to work with you on it. You can, I mean, in the end, the draft that you send does not need to be the finished story that goes out to publication, right? You are sending this to an editor in the hope that they will work with you on this story and publish something that's satisfying to you both. So, so go forth and make it sound like I'm ready to work on the story the way you want me to, rather than, hey, I know I'm sending you like a story that's maybe not up to your standard, but can you please consider it anyway? Sorry if that sounded a little therapeutic, but it just seemed, it's more common than you might think it is. Okay, that is a big step that you've taken. Having the confidence to be able to pitch a story in the first place is a big deal, and you've already done something that a majority of your peers have not. I want to go over kind of the theory of what a good pitch might look like. And I'm going to base this on, I don't have permission to show you the actual email. So I'm just going to abstract this a little and tell you about one of the most effective pitches that I got that had me writing back to the writer within minutes of it coming into my inbox. Okay, this was at a time when I worked for a local city publication called Brown Paper Bag, where we used to publish culture stories from Bombay and Delhi and Bangalore every weekday. So someone wanted to write me a story about a subject that, if you are from Delhi, you've probably heard of ad nauseum, which is a famous mango orchard in Uttar Pradesh, where there's like a special variety of mango that comes up, and they have tours every summer to that orchard. Ordinarily, I would not have, if you had written to me saying, hello, I'm making a trip to XYZ orchard in June, would you like a story from there? I would like to write about the experience of visiting that village and that orchard. might not have responded, or I might have said, no, thank you, because to me, that's a story that people do every year, right? I've read it 10 times myself. What this writer sent me was simply, hello, here's how I got your email ID, which is a surprisingly effective way of opening things, because, you know, again, the impression that you're giving is, oh, I've done some work to figure out who you are. She had a short description of her story idea, which was pretty much the same thing that I've just told you. But she made it sound new to me. You know, what she said was, from March to June this year, a rural orchard in UP cultivates, you know, these exquisite mangoes that are very rarely seen in the markets of North India. And something about that kind of drew me in immediately. I knew that technically, right? But this is also the trick of good magazine writing, which is, if you know, you've probably noticed, right? Like, unlike news stories, feature stories are really grounded in the familiar. So the trick of a good writer is often to tell you something familiar or something where you know the facts, but to put it to you in a way that makes you, that draws you into the piece, because you feel like you're in the hands of a storyteller. So she introduced the subject to me, even though she knew that it was likely that I knew it already. She talked about the relevance of the story. She said, this is in the news because XYZ. Super effective, because she wasn't trying to pitch it to me as a story no one has ever told before. She was saying, this is why it's special, and this is why people keep writing about this subject. Another great point, because that gave me the confidence that this writer, whom I didn't know before, had thought about the fact that it was important for me to have a new angle to the story. So she gave me the angle, she gave me the relevance, she gave me a peg to the story. The next thing she said, this was her 4th paragraph, okay? And like, the email hadn't gone beyond 200 words at this point. Each of these paragraphs was really brief. She told me about how she was planning to execute the story. I'm going to take a day trip to XYZ. I'm going to speak to so-and-so people. I'm going to taste the mangoes, and I'm going to, and here's what I want to do so that I can describe the experience of eating these mangoes in the best way that I can. And then she introduced herself last of all. She said, you know, she said where she was from. She said what her previous experience writing was. She had never been published before, but she had a blog. She linked me to her social media, where I got a sense of what her writerly personality was like. And the final argument she made was, here's why I want to write the story for your publication. And that to me really worked, because that meant that this was someone who, this was someone who was interested in my publication. And while it's not always necessary for you to give people that sense, sometimes it's just really hypocritical, right? To say, oh my gosh, your publication is the best. There's no need to do that kind of thing. But it made me feel like this writer was also a reader of the work that I do. And that gave me the confidence to work with her. I wrote back to her immediately. We did the story, which ended up being great. And then I ended up having a really solid working relationship with this writer for the rest of the year. I want to say that if you are a debut writer, it is very important that editors get to see your work. So do not worry about not having bylines. But this is why it's kind of important for you to have a presence on social media or to have a blog. Actually, let me just wrap up there. I'll finish the rest of it maybe in Q&A. Thank you, Rohini. And sorry if I took up a bunch of time.
No, not at all. We'll come back to things that you have missed out later, and we can talk about it if it's related to any questions. So, so a lot of what Supriya just said is actually very similar to what I've put in some sort of formula, because I often, when we write a lot of pitches, after some time it becomes habit. But some of those things that she said is, apart from things being short, keeping things short and personalizing your emails, I'm talking about that one, I'm going to focus on that one section of your email that people usually, the editor usually adds onto their workflow plan and takes to the editorial meeting usually to have a larger discussion with the rest of the team. And there should be a section in your email that's easily transplantable onto that editorial plan. And the editor you are talking to, you may know and have worked with before, and is someone that trusts you, but you'll still have to do all the selling, all the explanation and all of that for in that transplantable paragraph. That organ of your email should have everything. It should be all inclusive so that anyone who looks at it, the editor you're writing to, their boss, or the copy editor, everyone in the team should be able to understand. So that's how I see it. And that's how I've seen over, and all of this is learned through making a lot of mistakes. And I'm going to next share a pitch I wrote just this week. And I did for a story I did this week. And even this pitch had to be rewritten, and I'll tell you how. So basic formula for a pitch is that the first line is just like in any article, it has to be attention grabbing. I always assume that editors have very little attention span. They want to be excited. They want to be, they want to feel that you're empathetic to their time and all the work that they're doing. And as Supriya said, they're reading a lot of pitches. So something it's just like any other reader, but an extremely discerning reader who needs their attention grabbed. That's how the first line should be. It's not actually a tall ordeal. It's pretty simple. I'll show you how. The second thing is that there has to be a news peg, and the sooner it comes in the pitch, the better. And kind of twin it with what the scope of your article is. I'll show you how there are things that people have kind of pitches. I've also asked some friends of mine to share pitches that they have, and I'm using one or two, and I'm going to show them. So some of those pitches, we tend to write things like, there is an agrarian crisis going on. Drought has hit some of the most agricultural regions of the country. These are off-putting things, and they're too wide in scope. So we need to narrow the scope and sharpen it. Then what are the larger implications of this news item, right? What is the uniqueness that you are bringing? So you can also call it the story angle. Then what are you planning to do, which is your reporting plan? Why should you do the story, right? And this also, I think there is a lot of conversation often among freelancers about our stories getting stolen, our story ideas getting stolen, pitches being, and I'm using the word stolen very consciously, because it's not, sometimes it's inspired, people can say. Sometimes there's a lot of news going on around a subject and different people write it, but not only do you have to, in that space of writing where a lot of writing is happening around one topic, you have to differentiate yourself both with the uniqueness of your pitch and also the uniqueness of your voice, why you are writing. Not because you're a great writer, and not because you've worked on it already or you thought of it. These are not reasons enough. Sometimes distance, how close you are to a place, the languages you speak, the body of work that you've already done on a related subject, all of these are why you would be the person to do the story. And then the timeline, I'll tell you why you don't set yourself a deadline. Editors hate that. They like to give you the deadline, but set a timeline. Say how long it may take you to do that story. Then there are other things that, where you ask, is it of interest? How you convey sort of, I'm sorry if I'm infantilizing any editors, but I actually see that there is a lot of, I assume, impatience and lack of time and disinterest in editors. Basically, I think of the worst editor. Most of the editors I work with are not like that. But I think of the worst editor in writing a pitch. And then right at the end, I usually include a little bit of about me, a little about me in the end, so that if they already know me, or if they don't like my story at all, they won't even get to that point. But if they do like the rest of it, they'll get to that point and read a little bit. And that's the part where, as Supriya said, you can show off a little bit. So one example, this is a line for a pitch I wrote. So this will be available. You don't have to write down all this. This will be available. There's a child in somebody's room. If you just turn your audio off, then we'll be able to hear. Thanks. First thing I want to talk about is this pitch that I wrote this week for a 900-word news feature, and it is around digital health care that the government is announcing. You don't have to read this because it was rejected. So this is the editor's response. She said, "Thanks, but I don't see things that would excite the particular audience that this magazine, this newspaper caters to, and that the Independence Day speech is too old. Actually, what happened is that I wrote the pitch last week during Independence Day, around Independence Day after listening to the speech. And then I was lazy and I didn't change the first line. So I deserved this. It's not exciting. Why? And I've written some things about privacy, worries around security, because when there is a new national ID for health ID that every citizen will get. And also a lot of medical reports are going to go online. I'd written about privacy advocates worrying about that, but that sounded tiresome to the editor. So I rewrote the pitch, and this is how I rewrote it. So first line, this is what I made the first line. And these are not, this is not like the best pitch or the most superior pitch, and I'm happy for any feedback later on, but this is a successful pitch. It was sold and the story is written. So I'm just saying that for this editor, for this publication, for this story, and for me, this worked. But there are certain formula and some formulae work. So first line, I thought this is kind of for her. This sold the scope, and it grabbed her attention. And I'm saying that is it so new? Digital healthcare exists in other countries. Is it so new in India? This is a non-Indian publication, that I write for regularly, and I still had to kind of rework this pitch. And so Prime Minister Modi announced the National Health ID. This is the new spec, and that from almost banning telemedicine, India will have a lot of it now, right? And the implications. What are the implications for digital health? What does this mean if we're going to become digitized? We're going to digitize all of this. So you a little bit on the history of Indian healthcare, how ailing it is, but not go into too much statistics and stuff. Just say what's the problem and where the gap is, and where are the areas in which digital healthcare will not be addressing those gaps. So these are the ways in which the implications get addressed, right? And then what is my reporting plan? That I'll speak to leading players, then the tech developers, the people that I'll speak to. I don't have to mention all of them, but I did, because I did speak to all of them, and I was kind of presenting a will this work sort of economy story, where it is at, and will this work? So the why me was just that I've already been talking to key players, that I can do it in 2 days. And you are the boss part of it is just as simple as, is this of interest? Tell me if you have any questions, right? So what I always avoid, and what I think what I would suggest others also avoid, is like here, the 900 words I know is the space they usually have for the longest story in the newspaper is only 900 words. So that's why in my mind, I'm kind of limiting my reporting to that much. So that's the title I've given this, but I would not say 900 words, even if I'm planning for it. They would, sometimes they'll give you 1,500 words. Sometimes they will give you 500, and then you may have to negotiate. Let it be said by the editor. Then never say that you've already written the piece. I hadn't here, but I would suggest that even if we shouldn't say it, because they feel like they didn't have any part to play in this, or it's like reject from somewhere else. Even if both are true, I would say don't inform the editor about it. Be strategic like that. And if they feel like they have commissioned the piece and that they have had a hand in making it fit for their newspaper, this is not just psychology, right? This is also true for how papers work. They want to have stories which not only have unique voices, if it's a magazine, but in newspapers and websites, they do have a style and they do have preferences, and we should allow them to have that. And things like statistics, I've mentioned one because I thought the number of 800,000 doctors to get online is very, it can be huge and can seem like for any country, it's a pretty big deal, that many number of people going online. And the challenge is expressed there. Unless it's game changing, don't mention statistics, people's eyes glaze over it. And it is too much detail. And don't tell the whole story or give away any particular scoop. So I did have a person I was talking to who admitted that the kind of healthcare digital system that is being built had some problems in terms of the way you digitize, that PDFs were uploaded and stuff, instead of actually having searchable data. This is not something that is known. It's not some big deal, but it adds value in my story. I wouldn't mention it here. right? A newspaper can do like a 300-word story, and my nice 900-word story will be dead if they know this. So I'll move to the next thing. So sometimes you don't have to get into the whole pitch. For another example, I want to say is like sort of a mini pitch, which is, dear whoever the editor is, how are you? Some person, this is the personalizing that Supriya was talking about. I'm asking to, this is something I think I did in 2018. And these are all real pitches that I've written. I've just shortened some of them. That there's a massive farmers rally in Delhi on November 29th and 30th. And this is what they are going to do. Thousands are coming from across the country. This is to set the drama. And lots of university. This is to say why it's not just farmers, because unfortunately, a lot of newspapers don't care about farmers. And I have cynically understood that. But at the same time, this march was truly different. So I'm not making stuff up also, right? So it is the kind of march where there were a lot of non-farmers involved. Very deliberately this was done, and that it was quite beautiful when it happened. And this is what I was excited about and why I was going to the farmers march as well. I had sent this a day before the farmers rally. So at 2 days before 27th to the editor saying, is this of interest to you? So these are the aspects of it. So I'm writing to ask, so I don't usually write more than this in an email unless I really know the person. Even otherwise, I just get to the topic. As you know, the editor in the previous case said, she didn't feel excited. So I have taken this quite to heart, and the excitement part is the kind of the visual you can draw by saying thousands of people are coming, and a little bit of my television training made me cynical about this as well, and I incorporate that into for the drama and the scene, the possibilities for scenes in your story, right? And that is also the unique part of this story is the fact that there are non-farmers who are collaborating with farmers in doing this. This is, that's the you are the boss part. So she didn't respond. There was no response from the editor. Then after my email, 2 days after the first email, what I sent was, hi. And I just want to say that in my mind, every time I think a lot of people say in this hi and hello, there is something to, I usually say hello, but here, because she hadn't responded, I didn't want to say hello dash, right? It would sound like that. So I did a hi. I'm sorry if this is like nitty-gritties, but sometimes it matters. And then, this is the editor's response that she was snowed under and there are like lots of other things happening, but they're not commissioning at the moment. Thank you. The exclamations, you understand, from the exclamation, you can tell this is an American publication. And then I don't usually use this many exclamations, but I do when I write to American publications. And then here I'm saying, let me know. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Keep me in mind because the relationship with the editor has to go on. And then she also told me happy holidays. So basically, this was also a rejected pitch, but we left happy and friendly, and we also worked after that for many other stories. So then what do I do with this pitch? I'm interested in this story. What I did was I went anyway. I did the reporting. And what I did was I happened to be with somebody, meet an artist who was in town, and I took her along. And we decided that maybe we should work together. And I thought that maybe this is a new way to find new readers for an issue that I care about a lot, and for an issue that was not really being covered in any different way. It was people who were getting ignored. And there is again that traffic narrative of farmers walking a lot into a city and bringing traffic to standstill. I wanted to avoid that. Of course, I wouldn't write that, but what new way can there be to do this story, right? So what she did, she sent this email to a culture editor. I thought of this as an environment story, and I thought of this as a political story, but I didn't think of it as a culture story. She thought of it like that. So when we worked together, what she said is, she pitched me, she sold me very highly and said that how we ran around all Delhi. She had a personal relationship with this editor, but she still had to pitch this, right? And that in this march, there were these farmers, and we worked on these lines together, and she personalized it for the editor and to include her voice. The last line, how the world's poor will be leading the fight against climate apocalypse, would not be a line that I would ever say, but that is her voice, and she said it. And she also attached a little bit of the work that she did, the sketching that she had done while we were at the march. And I think a combination of this clinched it. So, sorry, let me go back there. So what we did was she did these sketches, and I wrote the words that went along with the story. So it didn't get sold to the previous magazine, but it did to this one, and a much nicer one in a way that I really enjoyed doing. So some rejections do have some value sometimes. Right. And now if I had to work on, this is another story I did, and I'll kind of stop after this. I have lots of examples, but this is an in-depth story that I worked on, which was around a clerk's murder in Dadri, allegedly for the family eating beef and slaughtering a cow. So this is just this section. You don't have to read it because we just look at what I did. I had a long conversation back and forth through email with the editor who was interested in the story, but we were not able to figure out how I would write the story, I was writing this a year after the event, after the murder. And we were looking at and by then almost 100 lynchings had happened, and cow vigilantes were all over the place. So what can I bring that is new? The story changed a lot from this pitch, but kind of remained, the core of it is there in this. So the first line is just, and this we wrote together so that he could take it to the editorial meeting. Otherwise, he was totally sold on the idea. But we had to frame it together to have this. So sometimes for long stories and for editors who are really into it, you have to be very patient. Of course, this story then later on took me almost 2.5 years to finish and publish. And it was frustrating, but it was deep. It's a great learning experience in terms of how you excavate a story from random, complex, different parts. So the lead sentence was just the fact itself of what had happened. And I thought a bit about the first 2 words being last year, which is so not a news peg, but the extent of the violence and how shocking that itself is, that you die for the rumors that you ate beef, I felt was shocking enough. I don't have to add any drama. I don't have to do anything to it. But what is the news peg now? Over time, there's been polarized debate and around that, and over the years, this what had happened then, the news peg then was not the murder itself, but that the complaint was filed against the family on charges of cow slaughter, the family that was bereaved. Then the reporting plan. So this is the shortened version of the pitch, which I'm just sharing here. So the reporting plan is that I would keep a clerk and his family at the center of the narrative and report the rest of it through a personal lens of cow politics. What it is like for the family, what it's like for the cow vigilantes and the people the Hindus who feel offended that there are people who eat beef or that a cow is being slaughtered, and what is happening within that village. That is kind of what these ordinary citizens, but the implications is that this is not just between a mob and a family, but that there is the state involvement. And we know about this story, so I won't go into this. Most of us would know about this story. Then what is, for an in-depth magazine, it doesn't have to be that new, but there has to be narrative promise. This has to be something that people should want to read. It has to be, it should be literary, and those are the demands of this kind of story. So I tried to work in what possibilities for scenes there can be, the kind of voices that I can pit against each other, that I can bring, that the complexity can come through. Of course, a lot of this may not successfully happen when one does the story, but it's great to have that ambition in the pitch. The pitch is the moment to do all of this, but don't oversell what you can't do. I'd say so. I mean, and I also gave a little bit of the context for a foreign audience about an example of why it's so complicated. Which is the kind of thing that I may usually not need to do for an Indian publication, but I have found that when I do that, things are much clearer. So I still do it, maybe not to that detail. I don't have to say the North Indian state of Uttar Pradesh is the most populous. I don't have to say that. I can just say Uttar Pradesh, but there are other details that I still have to give. Then this is the other part of the identity. I talk about that also. And then here's the why me part, right? That I'm already in touch with the family member. And this is a family member who's uncomfortable talking to the press and has been for the last year or few months. I had built a relationship with him, which actually started with a Happy Independence Day message that we sent each other, which is quite ironic. And then after that, we had conversations. I didn't go into what we talked about, except this main thing that he said, that he had a feeling that it was because of his family's growing prosperity. So I just mentioned that little bit, which kind of proves to them there's something new, and it's also not something that one really was hearing about at that time. So usually for long form magazines and where you're looking at news features, I think, so they're asking me to wind up, so I'll just quickly wind up. And I would always say I'm happy to discuss it further, because they usually want to explore some parts, they don't like the other parts. So I leave it open there. Explore other angles, don't ever write unless you are open to it. Okay, so this is I'll just show you one thing and then I'll finish. This is for an Indian publication. This is actually what I sent to the News Minute for a video story. For Indian publications, I find, and also TV and web, that there has to be, of course, you don't have to give much context, much less context you still have to give, because they may not know that all editors don't know about all sectors. Then there has to be some specificity. It has to be much shorter, right? And here you just have to, for the about me part, I also mentioned that I live in Bangalore, that's not very far from Coorg. I also speak Kannada, that I've been a television journalist for 5 years. These are just the points I said right at the end, when they're feeling like, oh, this is a good story, but why should she do it, right? So I'll show these other things later when we are having the discussion. So, okay, I'll just continue now to ask Mehthab to give his tips on how we should write. And meanwhile, whoever has questions, as I think some people are already writing on chat, please do share your doubts or questions or anything on the chat, and I'll ask them in the end. We'll talk about it. Mehthab?
Thank you, Rohini. Thank you, everyone. Both Rohini and Supriya they have explained things in detail. So I think I don't have much, because I have also been using, and in my experience, this is how things work. So I think where I would like to start from is asking this question, that is there any difference between pitching for Hindi or English, or Hindi English, or Hindi English Urdu publications? So that's where I think I would like to start from. To be honest, it does not matter. I mean, in my experience, whether you are writing for Hindi publication, Urdu publication, or English publication, these are the three publications I write for. But what matters is what publication you are writing for. So the point I'm basically trying to make is it's not about the language which matters. What matters is for what publication you are planning to write. It is very important to, I think, understand. And if I have to say in, say, Hindi, Hindustani, so आप क्या pitch कर रहे हैं, आपको क्या लिखना है, आपकी story क्या है, I think इससे ज़्यादा important ये होता है pitch करते वक्त कि आप किसके लिए लिख रहे हैं. आप जिसके लिए लिख रहे हैं वो आपके story idea में interest होगा या नहीं होगा, ये सवाल हमें होमवर्क करने के वक्त करना चाहिए. We have to ask ourselves whether this story will interest the publication or not. Of course, we can't guarantee कि सामने वाले को interest होगा उसमें या नहीं होगा. But I think there are certain things, certain things we can do on our part. Maybe looking at the publication, say publication, and finding out what kind of stories they are publishing, and what is their focus. तो मैं अक्सर मैं ये बात इसलिए कह रहा हूँ कि having worked as an editor और दूसरे publications को pitch करते वक्त भी मैंने ऐसा देखा है कि जब तक आप ये क्लैरिटी नहीं हो कि आप किसको क्या पिच कर रहे हैं. सो लेट मी गिव एन एग्जांपल कि मैं पॉलिटिक्स पर एक स्टोरी लिखना चाहता हूँ, बट अगर या पॉलिटिक्स से रिलेटेड, झारखंड की पॉलिटिक्स से रिलेटेड एक स्टोरी लिखना चाहता हूँ और मैं उसको एक एनवायरनमेंट के पब्लिकेशन में भेज देता हूँ जिसका कि फोकस से डाउन टू अर्थ को भेज देता हूँ, इट इज लाइकली टू बी रिजेक्टेड. कई दफा हमको ये लगता है एज राइटर्स, वी फील कि हमारे लिए क्योंकि स्टोरी बहुत अहम है एंड दिस इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट स्टोरी, तो हमको ये लगता है कि पब्लिकेशन के लिए भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होगा. हम ये नहीं समझते हैं कि वो उनका फोकस एरिया, थ्रस्ट एरिया नहीं है, जिसकी वजह से परेशानी होती है. तो हमको ये सोचना पड़ेगा कि हम किसको क्या पिच कर रहे हैं. तो अगर हम मान लिया कि डाउन टू अर्थ को पिच कर रहे हैं, तो वहां अगर हम प्लेन पॉलिटिकल स्टोरी अगर हम पिच करें तो नहीं चलेगा. बट इफ वी आर पिचिंग अ स्टोरी विच हैज एलिमेंट ऑफ से पॉलिटिक्स ऑफ एनवायरनमेंट इन झारखंड, दैट इज लाइकली टू बी टेकन और एक्सेप्टेड, उसके ज्यादा चांसेस हैं. तो ये चीज मुझे लगता है बहुत बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है. सिमिलरली आई थिंक ये भी बहुत मैटर करता है कि आप कहाँ से लिख रहे हैं. Like if I am say writing from, I am based in Delhi and I am writing from Delhi, I'll be writing from Delhi. And if I'm not traveling to say Jharkhand, but I want to write a story on Jharkhand, then I think we should आप ऐसी स्टोरी पिच ना करें जो कहे कि जो ग्राउंड रिपोर्ट है. हाँ, कई दफा हमने ऐसा देखा है कि लोग ऐसे पिच करते हैं कि वो दिल्ली में बैठे हैं और वो झारखंड की स्टोरी ऐसे पिच करते हैं एज इफ दे आर डूइंग ग्राउंड रिपोर्ट, विच इज नॉट हेल्पफुल. कभी भी कोई भी पब्लिकेशन उसको मुझे जहां तक पता है पसंद नहीं करता है. सो व्हाट कैन वर्क इन दैट केस इज कि आप सिंस ऐसा हो सकता है you have worked in Jharkhand and you have a insight, you have connection, you have contacts over there, and दोनों को मिला करके you want to write a news analysis piece. So it should be also clear कि आप क्या पिच कर रहे हैं. तो what basically I'm trying to emphasize on is two things. कि आपको पता होना चाहिए कि आप किसको पिच कर रहे हैं और आप उसको कैसे पिच करें. What will be the nature of your story? These two things are very very important in my understanding and in my experience. इसके अलावा I think what is also important is the format, is the medium. बहुत सारे publications का फोकस आज के जमाने में, आज के जमाने में खास तौर पर मल्टीमीडिया में हो गया है. एंड आई एम सेइंग दिस बिकॉज क्योंकि मुझसे ये कहा गया था कि मैं ज्यादातर हिंदी और उर्दू के बारे में बात करूं, तो हमको मैं एक बात कहना चाहूंगा, एंड दिस इज आई कैन से विद फुल कॉन्फिडेंस बिकॉज आई हैव स्पोकन टू सेवरल फ्रीलांसर्स कि जहां तक न्यूज़पेपर्स का सवाल है, जहां तक प्रिंट पब्लिकेशंस का सवाल है, हिंदी और उर्दू में आज के वक्त में there is no scope for or there is a very few outlets which will give chances to freelance reporters until unless you are writing a feature story for their supplements. वो अलग चीज है. सो जो बात मैं वो कह रहा हूँ वो बिल्कुल डिजिटल पब्लिकेशन को सामने रखते हुए कह रहा हूँ. इसीलिए ये भी डिपेंड करता है कि आप टेक्स्ट स्टोरी, अगर किसी पब्लिकेशन का फोकस टेक्स्ट पर नहीं है ज्यादा, और या उनको अगर टेक्स्ट चाहिए तो उसके साथ साथ वीडियो भी चाहिए, तो आपको उस तरह से पिच करना पड़ेगा. और ये इसलिए भी इम्पॉर्टेंट है कि आप देखेंगे, खासतौर पर मैंने ये देखा है कि अगर किसी पब्लिकेशन को आप सिर्फ टेक्स्ट स्टोरी देते हैं तो दे पे अ सर्टेन अमाउंट, बट इफ यू ऐड वीडियो टू दैट स्टोरी, थोड़ा मतलब अमाउंट इंक्रीज हो जाता है. तो ये भी बहुत बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट होता है. एज फार एज मतलब पिच करते वक्त किन चीजों का ख्याल रखना चाहिए, आई थिंक सबसे आई टोटली अग्री कि भाई आप जो स्टोरी पिच कर रहे हैं उसका पहला लाइन अटेंशन ग्रैब करना चाहिए जो एडिटर है या जो उसको देख रहा है उसको. एंड तो उसके लिए what I often do is, instead of putting that in first line, I put that as say as subject matter. So and I usually put things in question mark. So and that has often worked for me. And जब भी कि तो पहली बात ये कि जब आप स्टोरी पिच करें, and especially when you are pitching for the first time to an organization, I think it is very important that you one should introduce कि जैसे मैं usually करता हूँ कि my name is this and I am based in Delhi. And if you are multilingual or multimedia journalist, you should write that. And then I think the second thing should be is, if you are pitching a story to say some publication, it should be very clear in the beginning that you are specifically writing to them. So आप उनको कहें कि ये स्टोरी आइडिया मैं आपके पब्लिकेशन के लिए लिखना चाहता हूँ, लिख रहा हूँ. And then I think there are 3-4 say broad points which are already covered by Rohini and Supriya कि I think contextualize करना बहुत बहुत important होता है. जैसा कि रोहिणी ने बताया कि it's true that कि आप जब स्टोरी आइडिया भेजते हैं, हो सकता है जो एडिटर उसको देखता है वो उस चीज को समझता हो, लेकिन कई दफा ये होता है कि that's not totally decided by or single-handedly decided by that editor. Often it has to be taken to the editorial meeting or someone superior or to another person. इसीलिए आई थिंक आप उसमें बहुत ज्यादा डिटेल ना दें, लेकिन आई थिंक कॉन्टेक्स्ट देना बहुत बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट होता है. आप दो सेंटेंस में, 3 सेंटेंस में यू हैव टू राइट द कॉन्टेक्स्ट. एंड वो चीज का होना बहुत बहुत जरूरी है. एंड I will also and similarly say timeline is very very important. Until unless you are mentioning that कि आप कितनी देर में देंगे, and since I'm talking in terms of digital publication, so instead of writing say in days, saying 2 days 3 days, you should be writing in terms of hours. So like I often write, if approved, I will deliver the story within say within 48 hours of the of approval. So that kind of timeline has to be say mentioned, ताकि सामने वाले को एक चीज I think very important, especially those who are pitching for the first time and those who don't have a say relationship with that organization. शुरू में जो क्विक टर्न अराउंड या शॉर्ट टाइम सेंसिटिव स्टोरीज होती है उससे शुरुआत ना करें until unless you have a relationship with the editor or with the organization. Because I think it is too much to expect कि आपको आपके स्टोरी आइडिया का रिस्पॉन्स 24 घंटे से पहले आए, and especially when you are you are writing to Hindi and Urdu publications. Why I'm saying this? Because it's also about human resources. It's also about, say, unlike English publications and unlike big publications, जो हिंदी के publications हैं और या उर्दू के publications हैं, अगर उनका आप human resource देखें, they don't have say specific editors for specific things. At times they don't have a say, मतलब unlike कि managing editor अलग है, editor अलग है and chief copy editor अलग है, ऐसा नहीं होता है क्योंकि बहुत कम लोग मिलकर के काम कर रहे होते हैं. And this I can tell you my experience working with a digital publication and also interacting with other say verticals of say publications, Hindi as well as Urdu. तो आपको कम से कम 24 घंटे का टाइम देना होगा, और अगर कोई स्टोरी 24 घंटे में बदल जाती है, बहुत डेवलपिंग स्टोरी है, तो वैसी स्टोरीज आई फील शुड नॉट बी पिच्ड, बिकॉज जब तक वो पढ़ेगा और आपको रिप्लाई करेगा और फिर आप उस पर काम करेंगे, तब तक वो स्टोरी खत्म हो जाएगी. तो इसका ख्याल रखना बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है. यस, once you have a relationship with that organization or editor, then I think आप इसको कर सकते हैं कि आपने जो है आपने उनको भेजा और वो विद इन आवर आपको उन्होंने जवाब दे दिया और आपने 4 घंटे में स्टोरी करके आपने दे दी. So this is a thing I think जो कि याद रखने की जरूरत है. रिमाइंडर बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है. ऐसा नहीं हो कि आपने स्टोरी भेज दिया, स्टोरी आइडिया भेज दिया और जवाब नहीं आया है. कई दफा ऐसा होता है कि लोगों के पास टाइम नहीं होता है, या आपका जो स्टोरी आइडिया है, जो ईमेल है, वो स्पैम में चला गया. तो आई थिंक इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट, अगर 24 घंटे में आपको जवाब नहीं मिलता है, पॉजिटिव नेगेटिव, आपको रिमाइंडर भेजना चाहिए. कई दफा लोग ये भी करते हैं कि और ये मेरे साथ हुआ है कई दफा, which is not very helpful, and that's why I'm saying it should be avoided. That आप क्या करते हैं कि स्टोरी आइडिया भेजते हैं ईमेल पर, आपके पास क्योंकि उस एडिटर का व्हाट्सएप नंबर भी होता है, तो आप उसको तुरंत व्हाट्सएप भी कर देते हैं, और फिर थोड़ी देर में आप उसको फोन भी करते हैं और कहते हैं कि ये स्टोरी आइडिया हमने भेजा है. And this is a real life thing I'm telling you. As an editor, I have dealt with this. Excitement होना I feel बहुत important, अच्छी बात है रिपोर्टर के लिए, but वो आपका excitement किसी के लिए इरिटेशन हो जाए, इसका ख्याल रखना मुझे लगता है बहुत important है. I think यहाँ पर I think यहाँ पे मैं खत्म करूँगा. If there is anything, yeah, we can have that in.
Annie asked, how much do you talk to sources before pitching? And you get a yes from them before proceeding. I responded in the chat. Supriya and Mehthab, would you like to say anything about that?
I've responded in chat to that.
Okay.
if it's important for your editor to know that you have access to someone whose information is relevant to your pitch, it is really important that you speak to them. Rohini, your point about getting permission from a source is, if that's important, is really key.
How soon is too soon for a follow-up? I think Mehthab addressed that a little bit. Let's just say that kind of put ourselves in their position and not, I mean, I usually don't, I would usually send second email after a day or two, as long as the story will last. And then secondly, you would, I mean, I don't usually call or anything. That I reserve for as maybe the fourth step for checking on payment really, but not really for a story. If they won't respond to email, 2-3 emails, I stop and move on to the next. So it's not really time. It's about getting some response or the other. Some wonderful editors do take time to at least respond and say, sorry, we're not interested. But most don't. And so we have to just kind of say, it's like love, I guess.
Yeah, I think I would like to add one thing in this, is also on what day you are writing the pitch. So if you are sending your pitch on Friday, you should not expect, expect that you will get an answer before, say, Monday afternoon, because Monday morning will be very busy. So I think, so expect an answer on, say, Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning. So this is, I think, also to be kept in mind.
I'm going to add to the follow-up timeline by saying that this also differs depending on whether you are pitching a news story or a feature. Your news story may need, I mean, look at Rohini's presentation, right? Like within a week, her Independence Day peg was no longer, the editor thought was no longer relevant. So give your story the time it needs while you're giving the editor breathing room. I work mostly on features. So for me, a good follow-up timeline, which kind of kicks my own ass, is where if the writer writes back in 4 to 5 days or a week. And I'm okay with 2 follow-ups actually. If someone does that the first time and I don't respond and then they do it the second time, look, if you have to send 2 follow-ups, it's almost certain that the editor is going to say no, but it's good form, right? Or it's some kind of good form. So if you send 2 follow-ups in 2 weeks, to me, that's like polite, and then it's the editor's fault for not writing back to you.
So there's one question about whether you should explore particular angles depending on the publication and its orientation. Supriya?
I think knowing what that publication's style is going to really help hone your pitch. Big publications have often, and big publications with a history, have written about like everything under the sun already. Getting a sense of how they have covered your subject before will give you an idea of how to make a better pitch. And it will also help you avoid, like it'll help you cut it out if you're writing a story that it seems like they've already covered before, or with an angle that that won't interest them, with a political voice that won't interest them. So yes, I think the more you can make it seem like you are a reader or a consumer of the publication you are pitching to, the better it is for your pitch.
So Purna asks, if you're fairly young in the field, how can you make a case for your being the right person to write the piece? You can't prove expertise as easily, but is it enough to show that you've been researching the subject on your own? Mehthab?
I think to be a journalist, you need not to be an expert. I mean, that is my understanding. Expertise is required when you are writing an opinion piece or say analytical piece. So if you are pitching yourself as a journalist, I don't think you need expertise. What you need to have is to ask right questions to experts and your sources. So that's and I feel that let your story speak and work on that instead of bothering that whether you are expert or novice or you don't know the subject. So as Rohini was Rohini, not Rohini, but Supriya was telling in the beginning, that there is no need to put things uh, 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 like that, oh, I don't know things. Then I think the blunt answer would be, if you don't know, why are you writing? So I think you need not to be an expert.
So there's a related question from someone who is not a journalist or he's a banker. He or she is a banker, and says, how does a non-journalism person, I guess, write to? I think that is one of the more and more people, non-journalists, are writing in many publications, and that is an expertise, actually. Those people who are not journalists, if you have expertise or insights into certain fields, I'd say please do write. But since you don't have a journalism background, you may not know the things about pegs and whatever. So I'd say don't show off your expertise right on the top. You just have to say a line that you've been in, say, banking for how many ever years. You don't have to say where, and if it's a certain kind of publication, and if you are comfortable with it, you can say some great some institution that you may have studied from, which has value in, say, like a business paper, if you are from, Harvard Business School or something, or any Indian ISB or IIM. So it matters to some editors, so you can include that in one of the earlier lines. But what your story is, what your kind of, usually this would be an op-ed space, not a reporting space. So know that, find the contact of the right person. So in the newspaper or the magazine, it would have to be an op-ed page, or one of those things where they have like different debating views. I think Economic Times, The Hindu have these. So you have to know, you find the editor of that page. Every different page has a different editor usually, and send your pitch to that person, and they'll also probably have more patience for your lack of journalism background than a reporting editor. So one question is, are you more careful about what you give away in a pitch when writing to a publication's generic ID for pitches? And a kind of slightly related is, Shalini is asking, would you tell the editor of publication 2 that you initially wrote for a piece for publication 1, but it didn't get taken for whatever reason? And will it bring down the value of your piece? Either of you can answer.
So,
okay, Mehthab, I'll take this quickly because my view is actually different from Rohini's. In her presentation, she said, be strategic about mentioning that your story is already complete. To me, as an editor, someone telling me upfront that, hey, I've already worked on this story in a set of different circumstances is important. I think, practically speaking, this is because the editorial community, as far as metropolitan English language media, is so small that me getting to know that a story that I'm putting my faith in was initially written for someone else whom I lightly know would make me, that wouldn't be great for my relationship with the writer. So I think this very much depends on context, which I'm sorry is not a very helpful thing to say. I say it's okay to mention upfront that the story is in a state of preparedness. Rohini says be very wary about it, especially if there's another publication associated. So make your judgment accordingly. When writing to mail@magazine.in for pitches, this is also about the kind of work that you want to do, right? Tell us what makes the story exciting. But there's no need to write like a full personalized email, which is going to be more detailed until you have a personal ID for an editor. Okay, I'm done. Sorry, Mehthab.
I won't advise to say disclose that you have written this story for someone else. This is my suggestion, not advice, but suggestion. But I also feel that you just say that you have written this story, and here is the story. Do let me know if you are interested in it, and I'm also willing to rework. So that I think that part is very important, where you are saying that this is not the final copy. I'm ready to rework. Rework on it. If you want to change it, if you want to do it differently, I'm ready for that. I think that will have more acceptance. Whether you say that you had written it for some other publication or not, I think editor will know it was written for someone else. So to me, I think that hardly matters.
So clearly this is like a 2:1, but we won't make this some sort of voting thing. A little bit we can, but I think that I would say there is no blanket rule for this.
Yeah.
And it just like in life, as we compartmentalize different people and share differently with different people, I would say editors are also like that. Some editors clearly, like Supriya, prefer complete honesty, but some others may feel that we should get to know, and sometimes it is we would make mistakes, sometimes burn bridges, but there are lots of publications to rewrite to, and over time editors also change, so it doesn't mean that you'll never be able to write for that publication again. It is if you're saying in the context of how you've already done some work on the story, I'd say don't say that you've already written it. I would say, because that's a lot. I find that in my experience that the editors don't like rewriting an already written piece, and they feel like the angle and all that has to be changed. Even Supriya admitted that it's not a happy place to be in, because what each paper wants will be completely different, will be mostly different. So anyway, I'd say if you have a relationship with an editor, you can say that, and you have written a lot for them. But but do take your call based on what you've heard about the editor, and don't be afraid if it goes wrong sometimes. There's a question about if organizations make it clear on their website that they won't be able to respond to all pitches, then how long should I wait before I consider it junked? Organizations as big as National Geographic, for instance. Yeah.
I think Rohini and Mehthab, you might be better placed to answer this because I'm on the other side of this divide, editorially speaking. If I was in the position of this writer, especially if it was a features magazine like National Geographic, I would do the standard sort of wait a week or 10 days, and then within 2 weeks, move the pitch over to someone else.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's mostly what I would do also. And I wouldn't send, meanwhile, I may try to find the actual editor's email and things like that. And maybe mention in that you've pitched and you didn't hear, so you thought you can find a personal connect there. Mehthab, do you have anything to add to that?
Not exactly in this context, but a generic thing that one should keep in mind, that if your story idea or story, for that matter, story also, because it doesn't matter. What also happens that your story idea is accepted, then you send the story and then it gets rejected. It also happens. Don't think that if your story idea is accepted, your story will be published. I mean, this has happened with me because of various reasons. So what I'm basically saying, that if your story idea or a story is say rejected once, that doesn't mean that it will be not accepted later, in second time or third time. Maybe, and at times you have to send several reminders. It has happened with me that my story is published after, say, 1 month. And similarly, speaking from my personal experience, I had sent a piece, say commentary piece, which was agreed that, yeah, we will publish some 4 months ago. But I haven't heard, except acknowledgement, I haven't heard anything from them. And meanwhile, I inquired from the people, and then I have been told that it has been sent to the, say, for peer review. So it also depends what kind of publication you are writing for. And that's why at times the reviewer hasn't cleared the story, then you will have to wait and keep sending the reminders.
There are some questions about the commercial aspect, some of which Supriya has tried to answer in the chat itself. About, she says about reporting expenses, we should figure those out. And then there's another question, related question on when should we inquire about the terms of engagement? After the pitch is accepted or at the time we make the pitch? For instance, I recently discovered that an organization I contributed to accepts only one article a month. Right, yeah. So as editors, you should say when is the right time to talk money, and how do you talk money?
Very quickly, both as an editor and a freelancer, once the pitch is accepted, I feel like I have some power to bargain, right? So it makes sense for that conversation to happen then. And a good editor, when accepting a pitch, will say, I'm going to be able to pay you X rupees a word for this. I'm going to be able to give you Y expenses. Sometimes they may not push them. And then if they say, oh, I can pay you 1 rupee a word, then it's up to you to say, oh, but you're accepting this, which means you want this story. I would like to be paid 2 rupees a word for it. These are just these are not indicative amounts. I think that's when the conversation makes the most sense. For you to start off, particularly with an editor with whom you don't have a relationship, saying that these are your rates, I think just relationship-wise, that's not a great place to be. How would you guys deal with it, Rohini and Mehthab?
I think so. I usually talk money pretty early, like by early I mean before we start getting into the angle and all that. So the one part which Supriya mentioned, the reporting expenses money, I talk about, along with talking. Yeah. So the reporting expenses, I kind of try to work in. I don't have to talk it in money terms, but I usually say when I'm talking about what the reporting will be like for me, how I'm going to go about the story, I usually say I will need to travel to X place to meet these people. And I think those, at least you're writing in, and I often find that it puts the editor in the place of actually saying, we will or will not be able to meet your expenses, because they know there's going to be some travel involved. Usually, if we say that we're going to do this whole story, and as Mehthab was saying, if you're in Delhi and you're going to travel to Jharkhand, I think it needs to be clear somewhere that whether you're in Jharkhand already, whether from Ranchi you need to go somewhere deep inside. You don't have to say how you will be traveling and all of those things. Or you can just ask this open question of when you're discussing the pitch itself, when they've responded and they say this is good and they ask you some questions, I would say you respond to the content and also kind of work in questions like, can you also tell me if, what kind of, wait, let me just frame it. Can you tell me if you, because these are things where they shouldn't feel insulted and shut it down immediately. So I'd say if you asked something like, can you talk about the terms of reimbursement of expenses and things like that. So kind of make it broad, not will you pay for my expenses, but make it like it's a rule that they may have. They're usually making it up in India, but we would like to give them, we'll all be in the pretending room that everything is very proper. So I would ask them to say, and I think these emails are very important. Make sure things are put on paper, even if it's on WhatsApp chat or phone call. As we had phone conversation, maybe you were talking on the pitch on the phone, like we talk on the phone, these are the terms we decided on and things like that in nicer personal terms, because these will later, when you're not going to get paid or things are delayed, these are like contracts. So make sure it's all in writing. And in terms of actually what you will get paid per word, just ask outright, I would say. And I have had to learn that over the years to do it without feeling embarrassed at all. So because we are doing, this is a profession, so you can ask about how much you will get paid. What are your fees? Or what do you pay for such a kind of piece? Things like that. Mehthab.
Yeah, I broadly agree with Supriya and Rohini, but I also wanted to add that it also depends who you are. If you are beginning, I think it will be not very easy for you to start with money. If you are, say, writing an opinion pieces, I think it will be not very good. And if you are, say, also doing other things, say like you are a back professional, I think it is so it depends. But if you are a full-time working journalist, totally depending, this is your bread and butter, I think it is your right and it is our right that we should be upfront about it. In my pitches, I clearly write, and this is the line I use, and I say, needless to say, since I'm a working journalist, I would expect remuneration for this. So this is the last thing I write in my pitch. But I must tell you, when I used to be an activist, I was not writing this. When I used to work for human rights organizations and writing analytical piece or something, say, on human rights issue, I was not writing this. So I think it also depends who you are and what you are giving to the organization.
I just want to say that Supriya and I, and maybe if Mehthab is fine with it, we are happy to help any participants here with any pitches. So please work on what we've already said and try to make your pitch close to that. And if you have any specific questions, do send. We will share the email on chat. And Supriya, you want to add any tips for that?
I'm just going to put my email in the chat box. So if you have a pitch that you would like me to give you some feedback on, please send it to me. I'm going to keep this offer open for the next couple of weeks, and I hope it can be of some help. The last thing I want to say is that building a community around you as a freelancer is quite important, whether you are beginning or whether you're kind of further along your journey in the way Rohini or Mehthab are. So that sounded extremely touchy-feely. It's because relationships are everything, right, when pitching. And so who you know, for better or worse, becomes quite important. And this seems like a very difficult thing to do. But in fact, having that presence, on social media, continuing to dedicate yourself to writing, whether it's on your newsletter, which, as Rohini said, is actually a really good way to make sure that your writing goes out regularly, that you're building some kind of readership, that you read other people's work and give them feedback on it. All of that is quite important. So there is a universe around, the specific story that you're pitching, that it would be good for you to pay attention to if you haven't already. With that,
Supriya, so I think there's some time for you to, if there's anything you left out from your presentation, you said you did. You can cover that.
I have now forgotten and lost the thread of it. So maybe we can just address that if anyone has specific questions over email.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just going to put my email down in chat now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'll put my email as well. Supriya will share hers. And there's also the NWMI helpline email that Raksha has shared. So you can write to any of these, and we'll try and respond and in the next couple of weeks. And we're doing this because we, as Supriya said, we need to. Somebody has taught us. We learned on the way, so it's important to share it. And this is like kind of how to learn the ropes. But for years in the future, if you're going to pitch, this is not like an email to keep asking us how to. I am just wanting to say that also, how to pitch and whatever. Maybe Supriya is okay with that, but I think it's important to learn and keep trying, and don't. There's a lot of questions about should we rework and send pitches and whatever. I'd say totally do it, and that was what I tried to include. Thank you. We're winding up now, so thank you, Supriya. Thank you, Mehthab, and thank you, NWMI, and all the participants for joining. And let's all do some superb journalism. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.